Welcome to Core Connect, where we bring industry experts together for core conversations on modern manufacturing. There's no denying that the supply chain around the globe has been impacted. Constraints and backlogs have put pressure on manufacturers to look for modern solutions. MCA Connect's Director of Microsoft Cloud Strategy, Melinda Carlson, chats with our Senior VP of Solutions Development, Doug Bulla, on how real-time data, lean processes, and more can help manufacturers navigate the current supply chain. This is Core Connect.
Hey, Doug. Looking forward to chatting with you about supply chain today. I know you and the team at MCA Connect have been helping our manufacturing customers tackle some pretty complex issues related to supply chain pre-pandemic and for the last several decades, and even recently won a Global Partner of the Year award as a finalist in supply chain management. So
thanks,
looking
Melinda.
forward to soaking all that up.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's kind of nice to take a breath and step back and kind of think about what's been going on over the last 2 to 3 years and, you know, what we're seeing even now out there.
Yeah,
with the
a lot
supply
of just
chain
kind of heads
situation.
down firefighting, right? I mean, just
Yeah,
what
lots
might
of
happen
disruption, as we've seen on the news. Lots of disruption.
Yeah, I think by now, you know, people are pretty well aware of supply chain disruptions. They've had their own personal experiences with order backlogs and, you know, kind of finally receiving an order a year after placing it. But I'm curious what you're hearing as of late as you're meeting with our global manufacturing customers. What's top of mind now?
Sure. So there's a couple big topics, we've seen in the last 3 months, pretty important. A lot of our customers that I would classify in the discretionary perspective, meaning from a discretionary perspective, they're not exactly something that you have to buy in order to, to survive on a month-to-month basis. They've started to see a downturn as long as 3 months ago. So as we've seen inflationary pressures start to kick in and the costs of some of our everyday living expenses, certainly in the manufacturing sector, we have seen an impact from a discretionary spending perspective. So generally speaking, those are our early indicator customers as to, when we see slowdowns, or we see, in this case, maybe it's an opportunity to actually catch up and get organized on a backlog. So many of our customers have been running with significant backlogs compared to their ability to produce. And of course, parts shortages makes a significant amount of the news, but as important are the lack of people to build products. And we're seeing the great retirement. And I think COVID really kind of accentuated that and forced a situation where a lot of people decided that it was time to hang up and go off to whatever they wanted to do after work.
Right.
So.
Right. I'm curious, when you say a lot of our customers have significant backlogs of orders, what are you got any specifics there as far as the size of those or the length of time?
So some of our customers have been accumulating backlogs to the tune of 3 times their annual revenue. Wow. I've seen a couple specific examples where we have evaluated and assessed that if their annual sales were 400 or 500 million, they had a $1.5 billion in sales orders accumulated that they have not been able to supply.
And it's been a couple of years now since that started piling up.
Right. So with the concepts of a slowdown, I'm not sure it's going to be a recession, but certainly a slowdown and people allocating their money that they're making, to some of the more basic fundamental fuel, energy, things of that nature, it's a good time to scrub that backlog and really find out what do you have out there that's real versus orders that were taken and potentially been sitting out there stale for 6 to 8 months?
Yeah.
What do you have out there that is real? And as we like to say, it's better to find that out now than to be
Mm-hmm.
surprised when you
Mm-hmm.
start trying to build and ship these orders and find out that they're no longer required, or someone's changed their mind.
Certainly. Yeah. And as if you think about supply chain management and best practices in dealing with this situation, what are your thoughts on how this applies to supply chain in particular?
Well, um, there's a couple things where it comes to supply chain. Well, the first things are current situation. Current situation has been one of where, if I was traditionally making to stock or providing products in a situation where I had enough supply, that
Mm-hmm.
really it was all about customer care and best price and quality. We're driving for the last 30 years have been driving our economy. And you stayed in business by being high quality, low price, and
Mm-hmm.
very, very responsive to your
Mm-hmm.
customer. With the supply side constraints that we have now, a lot of our customers are companies. A lot of the companies that we work with are frankly just trying to figure out what orders and what customers could they possibly build and acquire the components from their
Mm-hmm.
suppliers.
Right.
How can they do that quickly?
Mm-hmm.
And what products can they actually get out the door, which is almost the reverse of the situation. But from the other perspective, that has driven a margin increase, quite frankly,
It's
because of
interesting.
the constraints across all of these economic areas, all these sectors of our
Mm-hmm.
economy that demand, supply chain, whether it's local products or offshore. All of these are driving a level of margin,
Mm-hmm.
which is not necessarily a bad thing for the
Right.
companies nor for our economy. Frankly, you know, we have been under such pressure for the last 20 to 30 years that people did not have the money to invest. It's kind of what
Mm-hmm.
we call the race to the bottom, where
Mm.
you just keep cutting and cutting because of the competitive nature of the sheer surplus of goods and services. And
Uh-huh.
right now what we're seeing is that with the supply side constraints, you have to really push back into your suppliers. You have to go beyond
Yeah.
just what you have on order, and you have to look back into where they are. Are they on a boat sitting off the coast, the East Coast, along with $40 billion of other goods, or are they actually at your suppliers
Mm-hmm.
location? And you really have to start digging into that data. And
Yeah.
instead of going
Something.
top down, you have to go bottom up. You have to look and you have to say, well, here's what I'm going to get. Now, what am I going to do with it? Mhm.
What do you, can we dig into a little bit more when you say you need to get 2 or 3 layers back into your supply chain? What
Right.
exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So data is quickly becoming, and the ability to action off data in your supply chain is quickly becoming a must have. So let's say I have some very important customers, I have very important orders, and as a company, I've had to really almost convert to a make to order company when I'm traditionally a
Mm-hmm.
make to stock company because I don't have the parts. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now you have to start looking at all your processes and procedures differently. And that includes a very specific view of, how you put together your manufacturing plans, how you put together your procurement plans. And if you're not out there assessing the risk of your suppliers and the risk of your suppliers from a
Mm-hmm.
risk perspective, as well as a raw material and component availability perspective. And if you don't have this information centralized into
Mm-hmm.
a data repository that you can do intelligent analysis against, you're really kind of left blind as to what shows up into your door, when it shows up, and then you have to turn around and do from the bottom up view of all your important customers and who gets what. So over the years, a big component of our lean manufacturing and a lot of the industries that we work in, say automotive, supplier, et cetera, have been very focused on lean concepts of connecting sales orders to your manufacturing, to your supply chain, basically coupling your order demand directly to whatever it is that you put effort into, both labor and material. And some industries have not been as focused on those concepts. A lot of that falls under, as I said, a lot of that falls under lean manufacturing from a concept or a deployment, a way of deploying those changes. But now we're seeing a lot of companies who have basically been forced into this make to order environment. However, they're not fully, they weren't fully prepared for it. So they're kind of running almost a mixed mode, push versus pull. Fundamentally, am I a batch manufacturer putting items on a shelf, but I can't really keep anything on the shelf, so I've got to start building specific products to specific orders. So from our perspective, there's a real opportunity here for those companies that have never had the opportunity or have never taken on the concept of changing their business permanently to a make to order versus a make to stock environment. While it's a lot of work with the current supply chain constraints, some of the change has already been forced upon them. And now it's just a matter of saying, hey, do I go back when things return to normal, which, who knows when normal is going to come back. Right. Do they go back to their old way of doing business, or do they take advantage of the current situation they're in and leap into this concept of becoming more of a make to order business that, means that you've got less inventory on the shelves, obviously with carrying costs going up and, the cost of money, et cetera. And also being very specific on what you invest that valuable resource of labor. Because you can't put labor into something that's going to sit on the shelf for 6 months. Right.
I was going to ask if that's really what enters into the higher margins you mentioned, just being smarter about where you allocate resources, not carrying as much inventory.
Right. Because you can raise prices. And we're seeing a lot of this as well. We're seeing a lot of the fluctuations in the commodities that we're dealing with. We're seeing a lot of those fluctuations causing, significant need from a supply chain and a data perspective to say, well, if my raw material and my labor costs are fluctuating like this, what is the price I should be charging my customers, right? So there's margin, and then there's erosion of margin. And erosion of margin is happening every day due to inflationary pressures that we have not seen, for 30 years at least. So that concept of getting all your data in one place and being able to dynamically dissect what am I making money on becomes a very important part of your decisions on who and what customers you're going to focus in on and make sure you provide product to. Right. And I've got I've had some very specific conversations with some executives where their customers who are accepting price changes are getting products, and their customers who are not accepting these price changes obviously are not. Right.
Well, and I'm thinking about the backlog of orders. You took money or promised a price point 2 years ago, and now you can finally produce the item at what cost. You didn't know
Right.
all of that
Which is,
back when you took the order.
yeah, it's a great point. You've
Yeah.
got not just the fact, is that backlog real, but do you really want to sell it at that price? And
Right.
would they be, is it time to go and do a price adjustment as well
Yeah.
to that backlog? All those, there's so many factors right now, and everything is flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And with the concept of a downturn looming, what does that really mean? Am I going to just jump right over that downturn because I got plenty of backlog, and I've got my raw materials under control, and I've got a very tight handle on my actual costs as they fluctuate, and I've got a good understanding of my labor market and my labor capabilities. That's, without that data on one place, in today's world, it's very hard to operate efficiently.
Yeah. And, certainly as you think about the feeling like you've got a handle on it and you've got this huge backlog of demand that you may not be concerned about softening in the market. But to your point, we have to find out if that demand is still relevant, if that's just going to result in returns that will ultimately re-enter your systems.
I think there's a lot of companies out there. I've seen it in even some of our different customers who have started to buy in excess product, which is just further plugging up the ability to the standard rotation of overseas containers, et cetera, from offshore suppliers. Now, couple that with the fact that we now have unprecedented, in the last 30, 40 years, inflation. All of that inventory they're panic buying is now costing them a significantly larger amount of money. I was just at a potential customer last week, and their inventories had doubled.
Yeah. When you mentioned panic buying from a consumer perspective as it relates to toilet paper,
right?
My supply chain brain went to more like component stock, and was hearing that some of the sentiment was, lean isn't working for me, or just in time isn't working for me. I need to buy up all the component inventory I can so that I'm ready for anything. And then was it a year and a half later? You're looking at this aging inventory that's not meeting demand. And now what do you do?
And you're in a supply chain that's still plugged up with all this, I think, panic buying. It's but now the executives are turning to that, going, "Hey, I can't afford to carry from an inventory carrying cost perspective. You're really chewing into my cash flow when we've doubled inventories, and yet we're still selling the same amount of goods." It's not like we were able to double our output, because
it's pretty straightforward math, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And I think, did I hear like $40 billion in inventory or supplier materials?
Yeah, I think that was the last number I saw, stationed off our East Coast. So we're far from getting to the end of this glut of demand and requirements flowing properly. So, getting back to normal, I'm not sure when that is, but I think that focus, I think the concepts of lean, carrying what you need, getting back to what you want, make to order. If you've been forced to go make the order, don't stop, push through, change your business so that you can become more agile. Connect what your customer needs to what you make, to what you procure, to what your suppliers procure. Make that a very important part of your business and change how you operate. Because I can tell you, our make-to-stock customers who we have in very complex industries, very, very unique, configure to order, make to order environments, those customers are meeting the right demands and they're supplying the right customers with products today, because they were used to doing that
Right.
prior to COVID. Now, all of them have part shortages. However, the process of maximizing those parts and converting them and getting them to the right customers to keep, to keep things going,
Yeah.
was already there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you earlier about this make to order shift and lean concepts, and how does that really show up if I'm a manufacturer in terms of my collaboration with my upstream suppliers?
Right. So if we do it right, we focus on supplier collaboration, and supplier collaboration goes from I'm cutting purchase orders for product to a relationship where I am buying capacity or capability at my supplier, for example. So I may not know the exact mix or configuration of materials that I need to buy from supplier X, but I do know that I will need so much capability or capacity. So let's get a relationship with that supplier where they're dedicating that level of capability to me, and I am promising them that level of demand.
Right.
That's a true lean concept, right? And what that does then is it helps you become more flexible. So as your customer orders come in with different requirements, you can turn around and get from your suppliers specific quantities of specific capability configurations that will meet those custom orders, as opposed to trying to build 100,000 of something. Go source 100,000 components from whoever's got the best price, and then sell those 100,000 to whoever potentially wants them in the next 6 months.
I think since we've kind of dabbled into the topic of technology, it might be interesting just to walk through some examples of how this shows up. If we've got a near side supplier that is well positioned to real time, execute on demand,
Right.
What might that application of technology or shared process workflows look like?
Yeah, so we have several customers that we've helped in this situation in the past, where we've taken an order backlog, say for the next, and we've taken an order backlog for a manufacturing facility. We've evaluated that order backlog based upon the priority of the sales order, and the priorities could be the customer, it could be the type of order, it could be the profitability of the order. It's kind of our customers they set that priority of that sales order. We evaluate those sales orders, and we look not just what we have available on hand, but we have near site that's not owned by the manufacturer in this case, but we can have those parts in a matter of 2 to 3 hours. So we evaluate those open orders, we evaluate those components, and we actually come up with a build to order schedule that gets loaded on assembly lines, and material gets called off, say from a near side, either through a portal collaboration or from EDI, and the trucks get loaded, they get brought over. And generally speaking, we're doing that in anywhere from a 3-hour interval to an 8-hour interval, or to a 24-hour interval. So you can actually schedule, load, and call off your material, which is a lot of what I call our traditional lean make to order companies. That's kind of where they've evolved at this point. So they're very flexible and take ownership of the materials, build whatever they're building, and put it on the truck and send it out the door in a 3-hour increment. Now, what that does is that allows you to change every 3 hours as you build a schedule. Your sales orders, priorities, and the orders that have come in are changing. So to back to the concept of how do I meet my customer's demands? Well, my customer demands for the next 3 hours could be totally different than my customer demands 3 hours later. And you could have a super high priority come in, and in this environment where we're looking at increments of less than a day, oftentimes we'll see high priority products or sales customer orders show up at a facility, and 4 hours later those products are on the truck and being delivered.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating about that from the CFO's perspective is that you only own those components for a few hours before they're allocated directly to that incoming demand.
Yeah, it really does impact your day sales outstanding numbers, for example, depending on the terms you have with your suppliers and the terms you have with your customers. But it can be very favorable.
Curious too what you're seeing in terms of the global production locations. Are we seeing shifts to producing closer to the demand source, or shifts closer to the raw materials?
That's a great question. This was happening even before COVID. There are forces in our global economy that are created either by governments or by different areas of government, say a renegotiation of NAFTA, or the potential to put a tariff on a given product at any given time from any country. And this goes across, I'm not just saying from the United States perspective, obviously this is any country in the world will do this. All of those things have been going on for many years. And every one of those will impact where exactly one of our customers will choose to build product for a year, for 2 years, for say a long-term negotiation to drive into an Asia company or a country, a long-term need to drive into an Asian country to start up a manufacturing facility. There's obviously incentives that go on. Different countries, and or in the case of the United States, different states will compete against each other in the form of tax abatements. All of these things, this to me, this has been a standard part of a global manufacturing environment for many, many years. It has been exacerbated in the last 6 years, but every day, decisions are being made on where to build based upon, the politics of the day.
And it all comes down to having visibility to that in a timely manner, right?
Visibility of that, and where I think where we see the hard work is how do I create a infrastructure or a set of my data and my execution systems? How do I create an environment where I have the ability to divert demand from one country to another because it makes sense for 6 months, and the forethought to have that excess capacity available? Because I think one of the things people forget about from a lean manufacturing perspective is lean does not force you to reduce things. Lean is not about leaning out. Now, from an inventory perspective, oftentimes with your processes, you will lean out your inventories. But on the flip side of that, often lean will show you that you should have excess capacity. And if you have that excess capacity and you have systems in place that allow you to shift demand by pressing a button, meaning that I could build any product anywhere in the world in one of my facilities. If I have the ability to do that, then I can truly take advantage, and I can kind of roll with the global the changes that occur,
More
whether they're
flexibility.
COVID or political or tariff based.
One key phrase I want to zero in on, as you mentioned, the ability to produce any product in any facility around the world. So I think it's a pretty loaded statement, the ability to produce any product, especially in a make to order environment. So talk a little bit more about what that means for traditional production lines.
Yes, so standardization of both process and technology and software, those are initiatives that a lot of our forward-thinking manufacturers have been tackling for the last 10 to 12 years. And what that means is that, I need a common footprint. Now, there's no way you're ever going to get a common set of processes or equipment globally, but that's okay. You just need a common technology and set of data coming out of those facilities so that you can divert, your demand to wherever you need to, based upon fulfillment policies at the time. And those fulfillment policies then can be executed upon. Now, it might be different equipment, but functionally, you're basically sending the same data and you're using the same technology and concepts to execute. So that's easier said than done. We do help customers through that process. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort, and in some cases requires some pretty forceful decision making to go on.
I know I've heard the buzzword of a supply chain control tower running around and, on the airwaves. I'm curious if that's a good way to sum up this capability that manufacturers need to develop, or how would you describe this? Control tower.
Yeah. So a control tower is kind of taking all these concepts that we've been discussing, and it can be it's a very large topic because it's basically looking at, how far upstream from your customers. I mean, are you looking at not just your customer, but your customer's customer? So for instance, you have dealerships, but really demand is not dealers. The demand is the end consumers. And are you trying to get closer to those customers, like much of the automotive industry? That's some changes going on there. So a control tower is really looking all the way up as far as you can, and all the way down through your supply chain as far as you can, and including all the factors we've kind of discussed, whether they're labor, capabilities, material availability, where it's at, how long is it going to take to get here? Can I expedite it? All of those things. The concept is getting all those things into a single engine that allows you to apply concepts of machine learning and artificial intelligence against it. And the reason we use machine learning and artificial intelligence is twofold. The first part is that machines can do things faster, as we have demonstrated for 50 years. Computer processes can do decision-making faster, especially if it's basic decision-making that's repetitive. And the second part is that, having this data exist in Excel spreadsheets where somebody's looking at it once a day, odds are you're having a hard time finding an employee to put into that seat to look at that Excel spreadsheet and keep it current. So getting that data surfaced up into that data model, that would be the concept of a control tower, and then leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence to real time enact on those inputs as they come in. Those changes are occurring both on your customer side as well as your supply. All of that is a concept that we would call a control tower. Now, nobody goes off and implements this in one shot. You have to be very focused.
I was going to say, it's, I think there are manufacturers that would say this is a very lofty goal. The control tower might be a little overwhelming. The idea of AI and ML seems so far out there that I just need to get my data out of my spreadsheets. What
Yes.
advice would you have as far as getting started on the mission?
Right. So our concept, we use a couple of lean concepts. We use what's called a pig chart, which is once we've kind of come in and assessed your supply chain to figure out what are the unique drivers that your employees have in spreadsheets that they're using every day to make decisions on and to change schedules, both production plans, supplier schedules, staffing schedules, et cetera. What are the things that they're using? Is that information, is it owned by the company? Is it in a place that's part of, your control tower database? Or is it sitting on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere on someone's desk? That's the process you kind of have to go through from a top-down perspective to figure out where, could I even, do some of these things? Once you've got that identified, then it very much comes to light is, what opportunities do I have? And if I document all those opportunities and then I rank them from easy to hard and from value to no value, I can then come up with a prioritized list to tackle, my data that supports my control tower. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we recommend you do, because if you're signing up to write a check for multiple millions of dollars to implement a control tower, in our opinion, in my opinion, that's not the right approach. What you really need to do is assess and determine where you have holes in your data from end to end, and then start filling those holes with applications that the company owns, and focus on successful small projects that drive you to the ultimate end goal. But you're seeing the payback in 2 to 3 month increments as you are moving through this process.
Yeah, this actually sounds a little bit like what we talked about earlier with focusing on a critical process that you need to standardize,
yes,
looking at your value chain and kind of breaking that down into a bite-size piece that's going to make the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time. Yeah. Well, I think you've certainly given our listeners a lot to think about in terms of what lean means today, what this shift to make to order might mean to their organization, as well as their relationship with their suppliers and how closely they collaborate. And, how you can kind of get a practical start on that lofty goal of a control tower and real-time decision-making on data that kind of helps you get your arms around all the moving parts of this modern supply chain. So yeah. I'll just invite you to share any closing thoughts as we wrap up.
Closing thoughts. Wow. In 6 months, all this is going to change. That's a closing thought. So maybe we can do another one of these in a while and, just see what's happening at that moment. I think, like any challenge, there's opportunities. And I really think that the opportunity for companies to rethink their strategies from a supply chain and, how they serve their customers, this is an excellent time to think about that, because I guarantee you there are decisions being made and product being routed that's probably not what, as an owner in the company, you want to have happen. So,
yeah. Absolutely. Lots of great opportunity to partner with manufacturers around the world to move the dial. So thank you so much, Doug, for spending time and giving us a glimpse into the top of mind supply chain topics for our global manufacturing customers.
All right. Thank you, Melinda.